One pseudograin, one legume, both with ancient roots from the same region. But who will prevail in this episode of Will It Tofu, the series where we use the traditional method of making tofu on non-traditional ingredients in hopes of landing an alternative that can stand in for soy tofu in taste, texture, and cooking versatility to push the bounds of plant-based possibilities. Hello friends and not yet friends, welcome back to Mary's Test Kitchen, where y'all been requesting these two for literally years, and I have been ignoring you, mostly because I believed it wouldn't work. Was I right? Leave your guesses in the comments below while I get started right away drowning these innocent navy beans in the fresh, pristine Canadian tap water. And while we are here, I'm going to add water to my new indoor garden. If you've been following me along in my recent shorts, you can tell I actually shot this video quite a while ago. But back to the beans, I'll pop on one of my favorite mason top lids and let this soak in the fridge until the next day, about 24 hours later. And voila! 1 pound of dried small white beans, soaked overnight, drained, weighs 858 grams, meaning they soaked up about 400 grams of water. That's like 1 3/4 cups, I think. Before blending, I'll pick out any beans that look kinda off. Then half the beans go into the jar and at least half their volume of water. Today, I'll do a bit more. More water helps to extract the protein, but too much just creates more work for me and more time and energy, of course, when the milk is cooked later on. Speaking of work, let's send our navy puree through the trusty nut milk bag. The first thing I noticed is this is going way more easily than the times I tried to milk my other favorite beans, aka kidney beans and black beans. My forearms are just sore thinking about it. And by the way, I'll link any past videos that I mentioned today in the video description just in case you missed them before. While there's no slimy effect this time, things got more difficult towards the end, and I had to give up before the pulp became as dry as I usually like it. It was just impossible. The pulp, as you can see, is still quite wet, with the texture of mashed potatoes? With the high starch content originally in navy beans, I'm not surprised that it was difficult to get through the nut milk bag. But I have to do it again. Just to give you an idea, in a pound of navy beans, there's 103 grams of protein, just 6.5 grams of fat, and 272 grams of carbohydrates. From the carbs, 13 grams is from sugar, 78 grams is from fiber, leading me to conclude that there should be 181 grams of starch. Compare that to soybeans, which have a lot more protein per pound at 163 grams, way more fat at 91 grams, and only 136 grams of carbohydrates, of which 41 is from fiber, 32 is from sugar, and only 63 is from starch. As we know from previous experience, too much starch in the milk gets in the way of coagulation, so we want to separate it out. However, high starch in the original ingredient doesn't always mean failure, as we saw with the peas we've tried so far. The starch was easily settled by resting, we just scooped out the top layer of milk, and all was well. Well, with differing levels of success, but I'd call them successes nonetheless. But if the starch is left in, the tofu result is mushy, waterlogged, and just not a good sub for bouncy high-protein tofu. This pulp probably has a small amount of starch in it along with fiber, mashed potato looking as it is, but if you felt it, you would feel the graininess from the fiber. Looks can be deceiving. Not so with this milk. Can you see the starch settling to the bottom of the bowl already? Here, I'll put it on the glass table so you can see the layer a little bit more easily. As usual, I left it for an hour, undisturbed. Afterwards, you can see the starch layer has deepened and it's more distinct. So gently now, I scoop. More like lower the cup in ever so slowly so the milk can flow in without moving too quickly. I don't want to disturb the starch layer if I can help it. At the bottom of the layer, you can see the opaque starch running into the milk. And this creamy layer of starch and milk, like a cornstarch slurry, goes hard when you use quick pressure, but it goes liquidy again. same as when I stir it up, so I can save this for another day in this handy glass container. This one comes from a set that I bought 3 years ago, so I can recommend it with confidence. If you're switching over to glass this year, you might want to check them out, so I'll leave a link in the description along with any other equipment from this video that I recommend. I use the starch the same way I would use cornstarch in cooking, but this amount is a lot less than what we expect to be in the milk, so I'm going to try another trick that we've used before. Heating the milk without stirring, the starch should once again settle to the bottom, get cooked, and gel up, so I can scoop it out. Or filter it out. This only works to a small extent though. However, it's winter and the daylight is short. I have to keep going. Bean milk of all types has to be cooked, otherwise you may get a tummy ache, and by you I mean me, so boil it for at least a few minutes. Then simmer it for 10 to 15, and then it should be well cooked. You can see the milk is now reduced in volume. Now to mix up our traditional coagulant, I'm using 1.5 teaspoons of calcium sulfate, aka food grade gypsum, in a half cup of room temperature water. I'll wait until the navy bean milk is down to 180 degrees Fahrenheit or 82 degrees Celsius, and stir it in. Initially, I don't see signs of separation. Remember in the last episode of Will It Tofu, this was the lentil milk at the same point in the process, so you can compare visually. They are different. However, this is not always indicative of our final result, so let's just get the lid on and hope for the best for our bean curds from the little white beans, also known as Boston beans, pearl haricot beans, white pea beans, and of course, navy beans. That name comes from its role as a staple food in the US Navy since the 1800s. But before that, they were cultivated for thousands of years in its native Peru. Speaking of Peru, did you know that quinoa also traces back to that area? Because of concerning news reports when quinoa became more known on the global stage, you might also know it's from Bolivia as well. There was a concern that the rising price of quinoa was taking it out of the hands of the people who traditionally consume it. I'll leave a couple article links in the description if you want to read about it, but currently, it seems like quinoa has been good for Peruvians and Bolivians overall, which is nice because I could buy this huge bag of quinoa in peace. Not so peaceful is my concern that quinoa will not tofu easily. First, the protein content. In 1 pound of white quinoa, there's only 61 grams of protein, 25 grams of fat, and 323 grams of carbs, of which 30 is from fiber, none is from sugar, meaning 293 grams is from starch? So little protein and all that starch was the main reason I didn't want to try this thing. Also, the price of quinoa and the fact that my household doesn't currently eat it for various personal reasons, but I will for you. And you, and you, and y'all too. This time, I'm only soaking it for 1 hour because I know from past cooking experience that quinoa soaks up water quickly. A sprouting lid does the job perfectly. See this foam though? I'm going to rinse it out in the sink to get rid of the bitter saponins. Damn it. This is worse than the mung bean fiasco. I need every little quinoa, squander nary a grain. Pseudo grain. Just like with our navy beans, about half goes in the blender, along with fresh water. Usually I blend on high for 30 seconds, but since the quinoa is so small already, maybe 20 seconds will do it? Again, I'll set up my trusty nut milk bag and pour in the quinoa puree. This time, I'm really able to squeeze the liquid easily. Wow, this is feeling really easy to milk. What a pleasant surprise. This was the part I was dreading the most, but it's actually going really well. Wow. Thanks, guys. Thanks to everyone who thanks to everyone who requested this video. The pulp is feeling loose in the bag, and when I turn it inside out, we can see the pulp is quite fluffy. The particles are larger than I'd like though. That could have contributed to why it was so easy to strain the quinoa milk. The question is there still protein locked in there? No time to ponder, I've got to process the other half of the quinoa, along with plenty of water, this time blending on high for the usual 30 seconds. That's much better. So it's very fibrous. It's still clumpy, like it clumps really easily, but the particles are much finer. So if this works out again, I would say blend on high for 30 whole seconds. Don't do 20 seconds like I did at first. Yep. All right. I'm gonna save that for making bread. The dried spots, they're like chalky. As before, I'll let this rest for an hour under a lid so no dust can fall in. In the meantime, I shall collect the starch. It's been 45 minutes and I can distinctly see, I think it's hard for you to see on camera here, but I can distinctly see a line right here. You can kind of see it. So I'm going to try to scoop out the milk without disturbing this layer here. I was hopeful that we would be able to cleanly take out the milk and leave the starch layer, but even when I'm gently scooping this out, it's disturbing the starch layer and the starch is coming up. I can see it in the milk. And when I go to touch the starch layer, you can't feel a distinguishable layer. So unfortunately, it's become suspended just with that disturbance. I don't think a siphon would work either, because just the slightest disturbance and the starch is kicked up. I'm just gonna pour this over, and we're gonna try using amylase to convert the starch. Okay friends, we've got our pot of milk, we've got room temperature water. I'm adding 1/2 teaspoon of gypsum. We have that nearby as our coagulant. If we even need it, we'll find out. Got my laser thermometer, wooden spatula, and I've got my powdered amylase. You can get this at a beer making supply store or find my link in the video description. The plan is to cook the quinoa milk first by boiling it, then letting it come down to the right temperature for the amylase enzyme to convert the starches to sugars. Make sure it's the right temperature for the coagulant and add that in as necessary. Oh, there's gelling. There's gelling on the bottom. So what I'm going to do is scrape up the gel and then I'm going to filter it. have some big chunks of clear gelled starch here. To be clear, this is not looking like tofu, right? It's jelly. This is so wild. Like, this whole thing is turning to jelly. I thought I was going to be able to just strain out the milk, or strain out the starch from the milk to separate it, but that's not happening. Is that unexpected for it to be this much starch? No, because quinoa, of course, is a grain. It is full of starch. Pseudograin, it's a seed. I think if we continue to heat this up, we could probably make, you know, the Burmese style tofu out of it. That is not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to make high protein tofu. So, I'm going to bring it up to 160 degrees. To get this to be 160 degrees without it like just bubbling up and splattering me, because it is so thick like tomato sauce, you don't want... I'm going to continuously stir it, and hopefully we can get it to 160. I don't know if we can, because right now we're at 140 and it is spitting at me. This is a little bit dangerous. We have a little bit of evidence of some burnt bits on the bottom. I'm just going to take that out. Well, I guess if you really want to thicken some soup, quinoa milk could be a really good soup thickener if you're okay with all the starch. We touched 155, but I'm not even going all the way to 160 because it was getting a little dangerous up in here. So I have a 1/4 teaspoon of amylase enzyme. I'm going to stir that in. I'm going to try to hold this at 160 degrees. Oh, that worked immediately. I can feel this loosening up. It's not as thick anymore. So the starch, the jellified starch, is turning into sugar, which, as you know, is water soluble. Like, it has immediately taken effect. Do you see how liquidy this got right away? Amazing. Let me keep it at this temperature for, let's say, 10 minutes. And then come back and see what we have. There's still some little lumps, and I wonder if I bump up the temperature, will those disappear, or should I add a little more amylase? Let's add a little more amylase. Why not? We have a little bag of it. Never know unless you try. So I'm going to put in, let's say, about an 1/8 teaspoon here. See if that does anything. The temperature has dropped down to 130, so I'm going to bump up the temperature on the stove. All right. We're at 160 degrees, and it does look like some of the little lumpies have dissipated. So I think just with the higher temperature, either the higher temperature or that little extra bump of amylase really did it. I'm thinking it's just the temperature change. I had these stoves set on too low. So, awesome. All right. Next step is I want to take this to a boil so that it will cook the quinoa proteins. And then afterwards, I'll take it down to 180 degrees Fahrenheit and add the coagulant, which is half a tablespoon of calcium sulfate and half a cup, just over half a cup of room temperature water. Room temperature because I don't want it to be too cold. I don't want to lower the temperature too much because our prime coagulation temperature of soy protein was 165 degrees Fahrenheit, 165 degrees Fahrenheit for, you know, good tofu texture. And so we're kind of aiming for that for all the other ingredients that we're using in this series. However, that's not to say that's the prime coagulation temperature for all of these proteins. We just don't know. Now the smell of this is odd. It doesn't smell like cooking quinoa. It smells like, I don't know what it smells like, wood? Like halfway between potatoes and a tree. Not aromatic, like not like pine and aspen. I wouldn't go so far. It smells like hay. Oh, hey, check out what this is doing now. It looks like some self-coagulation is happening. But also, when you see this, some of these lumps look like they are, you know, protein curds. Some of these lumps look like they're starch lumps. Can you see the difference? Like these kind of jelly-looking ones. These ones look like little jellies, and these ones look like little snowflakes. The way they're kind of fluffy. All right, so very interesting quinoa. Very interesting. I'm going to take the temperature down a little so that it just is at a kind of a steady low simmer. I don't want a rolling like big boil. This is so interesting. The whey is clear. I'm still seeing some little speckles that look like they are starchy. This little speckle here, it looks and feels like starch. You see how that disintegrates like gel? So I'm thinking a little more amylase, maybe? I'm gonna try. Why not? Let's try it. What temperature are we at? We are at 198. So at 198, the amylase apparently will not work very well, but I have a whole little bag here. Why don't I just try it anyways? Because we're crazy. What if we let it cool down to 180 and try some more amylase? I don't know. Let's get wild. So I'm turning off the heat now. I'm going to wait until this gets down to 180 degrees, and then we're going to add a little more amylase, because I swear that's what that looks like to me. Some of it looks like tofu curds. Some of it looks like starchy little nuggets. And I want those starchy little nuggets to dissolve into sugar so that it can go, the sugar can just be in the water and the protein can just be in the curds, and I can separate them fully. But like, look how little curds I have. We used 1 full pound of quinoa, and I have, like, the amount of curds does not look promising. Looks like we're holding it at 160. And yes, those little starch clumpies, I think they're disappearing. Okay, so it works. It works. Now, I'm seeing like a few little starch clumpies here and there. I'm not too worried about them. I think I'm gonna go for it. I think we're going to make some tofu. We forgot to add the coagulant. Okay, so you know what? Let's do that just for funsies. It doesn't look like we need to, but I've had a couple of comments saying I should add the coagulant anyways, just to see. So take a good look, my friends. This is about the amount of curd we have here, right? The amount of curd we have here, not very much. A few scoopfuls, not a lot. Let's add some coagulant and see if it makes any difference. I'm gonna bring the temperature up again. I want it to be 180, and then I'm gonna add some coagulant in. We're at 160 degrees. I'm gonna pop a lid on, wait 15 minutes, and we'll see what we get. All right, my friends, it's the moment of truth. So anticlimactic. Let's grab my favorite tofu press, link in the description if you want to check that out. Grab a cheesecloth from the collection of cheesecloths. This tofu press, it comes with a cloth, but I like to use a bigger cloth. So I bought a separate one. Well, I actually have a few separate ones. But This is the one I like best. It's big, it's tightly woven, and we're not gonna start like this, I forgot. Start like this. It's much easier than just scooping it over. Oh, we never did a taste test. Ah, opportunity lost. We never did a milk taste test, but we can do a whey taste test. I suspect it will be sweet because all that starch turned to sugar, right? It tastes slightly sweet. It doesn't really taste like, well, if we were talking Chinese desserts, it kind of does taste like tong sui, like, which is direct translation is sugar water, but what it really means is like a dessert soup. Anywho, let's get this these curds in here. The volume, however, look at this. Look at this small volume. It's a little bit sad. What am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? I'm gonna roll this cloth so that it fills the space on the side. Yeah, that's what we're doing. This is so silly. Okay, see if this works. Alright, that's going to be as tight as it goes. I'm going to drain the excess water. We're going to put this in the fridge and see what happens tomorrow. So I just had this wild idea about the quinoa whey. What if we boiled it down? Will it crystallize and turn into sugar? Can we make quinoa sugar? Can we have a series called Will It Sugar? That is so ridiculous. It might be interesting. Let me know if you want that in the comments below. Coming back to reality, what happened to our navy bean milk? Remember, we added the coagulant, let it rest for 15 minutes, and then let's take off the lid. And go in with our fine mesh strainer for some soup. Luxuriously smooth white bean soup, apparently. 5 stars, fine dining level creamy bean soup. But we're trying to make tofu, guys, so let's see what happens when we pour this into a cheesecloth. Oh, there are some burnt bits from the bottom of the pot. We have some whey draining through, and not a lot. That tells me there's starch in this milk holding on to the water for dear life. I'll take this whole mess over to our loyal tofu press. And spatula the residue from the sides of the cloth into the central mass. And do our best to neatly fold over the cloth and tuck in our soon-to-be some kind of tofu. Pour off the excess whey and cross your fingers, my friends. Can this possibly turn into a solid block, or will this go the way of our kidney and pinto bean attempts? Let's find out right away. After an overnight chill, let's pour out the whey that got pressed out. Do you dare me to taste it? It tastes just like savory vegetable broth. It's not bad at all. But how about the navy beanfu? Oh no. Flop. We have mashed potatoes. I mean, it tastes pretty good for mashed not potatoes. If we plated it pretty, it could be Michelin gourmand level maybe. Honestly, this is what I expected for navy beans, which is why I put it off for all these years. But quinoa! Will quinoa exceed expectations? I must say it already has to me, wouldn't you agree? Let's pull it out of the fridge. Good morning. Bye. So this is what we have after 1 pound of quinoa. Let's go ahead and weigh this. Oh, it just broke. 89 grams. Here it is. And you can see little blobs of starch in there still. But it's mostly the coagulated curd. Yeah, that's a little starch glob. Well, might as well do a taste test, I guess. It tastes like quinoa, mild, no bitterness. Right. What am I gonna do with this? Taste test. It's firm, grainy, tastes like quinoa. This is where a little bit of the bitterness lies. Interesting. The starch was not bitter, but the coagulated curd, the protein part, a little bit bitter, just a little bit, not a lot. See how it cuts. It just breaks apart pretty easily. And it could be because there's still like little starch globules in there. Globules? Is that a word? Globules? Is that what I'm trying to say? Yeah, it tastes like quinoa. So if you don't hate the taste of quinoa, if you love the taste of quinoa, maybe you would like this. We would have to refine the process a bit. And that said, we got 90 grams of tofu. That is somewhat firm. If we took away the little starch pieces, we would have a little less than this. Maybe 80 grams, maybe 75. 75 grams of protein from 1 pound of quinoa. You let me know if you think that's worth it. Yeah, like that. That just falls apart because of the starch. Now, is it because of the starch? We don't know for sure. I think it's because of the starch. But the color, I mean, the color is not bad. It's just so kind of a lightish gray. I wouldn't want to do this again. It was so expensive. I bought this package for $17 and I used 1 pound. So I guess it's not that expensive, but at the same time, I don't know, man. I don't think I would do it. And there you have it, my friends. Will navy beans tofu? Not this time. Will quinoa tofu? I think only with the help of amylase, but amylase really changes things, doesn't it? With it, we could go back and try navy beans or any of the other failed beans, as well as the quinoa. I should still have a lot left. As I mentioned, my household doesn't eat quinoa, so perhaps I should try again with a slightly different strategy? Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching till the end. I appreciate you so much. Please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it and subscribe if you haven't already, because we have so much more to explore. Bye for now.